Welcome, everyone, to the Switch for Good podcast. Here we are. I am Dotsie Bausch, along with my co-host, Alexandra Paul. And we have a special guest for you guys today. I have been really excited about this one. And Alexandra is excited to tell us about our guest.
Yeah, I definitely. He's such an interesting background. And I can't wait to hear about how you two know each other, too. So our guest today is Philip Keoghan, who hosts The Amazing Race, which has won 15 Primetime Emmy Awards. And he also hosts Explorer, which is the oldest docuseries on TV. He's the author of the books No Opportunity Wasted, 8 Ways to Create a List for the Life You Want, and Don't Let the World Pass You By, 52 Reasons to Have a Passport. And on his new podcast called BUCKiT, he interviews fascinating, courageous people, including our own Dotsie Bausch. But Phil doesn't just talk and write about adventure. He has them himself. An avid cyclist, he has ridden across the United States to raise money for MS and recreated the grueling 1928 Tour de France ride while directing the documentary about it called Le Ride. He has set a world record for bungee jumping, dove the world's longest underwater cave, and renewed his wedding vows underwater while hand-feeding sharks. Wow. It's so exciting. Hopefully we can live up to that and make this interview exciting for you, Phil. Welcome to our show.
Wow, thank you for having me. That's a long intro. I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
There was so much more I could have put in, but we'll talk about it over the course of this show. First, I want to know about how you two met, because I hear that somehow Dotsie shaving you is involved, and I just had to hear that story.
Well, I had to draw a line because we had to draw a line about where the shaving began and where the shaving ended. So 1998, I was working with some producers, and we came up with this idea to take my life list, my list of things to do before I died, and to sell a show to Discovery Channel, which was called Adventure Crazy. And the byline was, crazy is good. It's good to go do crazy things. So we wanted to shoot a test show. And so we decided that we would just shoot it locally here in Santa Monica. And Dotsie and I have a mutual friend, Jeff, who was in the cycling industry. And we decided that we would just do something crazy, like we'd go to Catalina and we would be on bicycles and we would race a yacht from Avalon to Two Harbors. So this team would be on a boat racing as we were riding over the hills to get to Two Harbors. And then if I lost this race, that was part of the deal, I would have to have my legs shaved. And it just so happened that we lost the race, and Dotsie was then in charge of getting a very sharp razor, and she shaved my legs. That's in a nutshell.
I kind of think you won, because I know there's a lot of men who would love to have Dotsie shave their legs. So I don't know. I think he might have made sure he lost Dotsie.
And our prize was none other than the local cocktail that they make in Two Harbors, which is buffalo milk and vodka. So this was before I was plant-based, and that was like our treat or prize or whatever you want to call it at the end. Even though I wasn't plant-based at the time, it was still kind of disgusting to drink that, because it's not refreshing, any kind of milk, when you finish a ride like that.
No, anytime you have a drink like that on a hot day, I don't know. It just does. It's not a thirst quencher for sure.
No. We had a good time then, and we've of course seen each other a few times since then, but we had a great time on Phil's podcast called BUCKiT, right? Which is ticket before you kick it, right? That's kind of it's moniker, meaning do everything you want before you die, seize the moment, and really be in it, right? Really go after it with the gumption. And so we had a great time. I went right to where you're seeing Phil right now in his beautiful place here in, right there in Marina Del Rey. And because he had me on, of course, we had a little bit of time to chat about dairy. Probably a little bit more than some of the listeners would have liked. But you said you got some interesting feedback, but most interesting to me and most exciting. And I felt very humbled that you took the challenge. And so we hung out 3 months ago, and you have ditched dairy ever since. How's it going?
Really interesting. It's been a really interesting journey. I've learned a lot, and it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. The thing I thought I was going to find most difficult was giving up cheese, because I have always loved cheeses. I've loved, I think of wine, I think of cheese, and so that was the part that I thought that I was going to find most difficult. But so a few years ago, I read this book. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it might be called Habits, but it's a book about habits and how we can change habits. And in the book, the big takeaway for me in the book was it takes about 22 days to change a habit. It's the habit of getting up to work out, the habit of maybe, going for a walk, or whatever it is that you're wanting to change. The first 22 days are the toughest. And then if you can get through that 22-day period, then it becomes a lot easier. So that's sort of how I applied my approach to just trying to get rid of dairy. And I have to say, in the beginning, it was really challenging, particularly with my favorite thing, which is I love coffee, and I love lattes, and I love flat whites. And so I thought, how am I going to give up this thing that I love? So I started asking for alternative creamers, I guess you could say. And I tried hemp milk, and I tried wheat. I think it's a wheat one. And
oat, maybe?
Yeah, oat, wheat, that's the one. Yep. And then I tried almond milk, coconut. And in the beginning, none of them tasted good. Like it was just like, oh, that's horrible. It's terrible. And it was a bit of a struggle, especially for the first few days. And then I decided that almond milk was the one that was the most digestible for me, like felt the best. And literally, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 days later, it started to taste good. Not like, oh, this is bearable, but it actually started to taste good. And then I started trying different types and different ones. And I looked at, on the shelves, I was suddenly starting to look at things I'd never looked at before on shelves. And then I arrived on this one particular one. Hold on one second. I think I have it in the fridge here.
Okay.
I'm not doing a particular plug for this brand, but
Barista Blend from Califia. Yep. Yeah, thumbs up.
And it's it just tasted really good. And the other thing about it was I found a way in my coffee maker to actually make it froth. And I would say 22 days in, I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I also started to notice a change in my breathing when I was working out. I didn't realize how much in the morning, because I normally work out in the morning, how much I was clearing my sinuses first thing in the morning. When I would start out on a workout, I would start to heat up 5-10 minutes into a run or whatever. And then my nose, I had to blow my nose. And you remember, Dotsie, from cycling, cyclists are they're quite open about just,
Yeah. Snorting on the side of the road.
And so I noticed that my sinuses were clear. I wasn't having to clear as much. And I'm not going to say that I'm 100% dairy free, because occasionally I accidentally eat something, but I have no problem at all now not having dairy. And I will even, ask now, does that have dairy? I would say overall my energy level is up. I just feel better for it. And since speaking to you, I started reading a few different publications about why this is a good idea and sort of understanding that we can all make a difference. And then I found this great book. I don't know if you guys saw it, the Reducitarian Solution. Have you guys seen that?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I don't know tell me what
Yeah.
grabs you
Brian's
about it.
amazing. I'm actually speaking to him tomorrow about going to their summit that they have is going to be in LA this year. So we'll got to get you there, Phil.
Yeah. So this is this guy, Brian Cateman, and I saw the book and I thought, well, this is an interesting concept because look, we all fall into patterns, dairy is such an intrinsic part of everybody's life. Eating meat products is an intrinsic part of everybody's life. And you can't just turn a switch and suddenly do what one person thinks is right to do. The more I learn about it, the more I realize that it's absolutely imperative that we make some changes because what we're doing right now is just not sustainable. And so to me, the way to get a mass change is not to just say to people, hey, don't do this and cut that off, and much more for them to come at it from a holistic approach and think, okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing it for my health, yep, for selfish reasons maybe, but bigger picture, why does it make sense to zero in more on a plant-based diet? Why is that better? And then what are the plants that work in a sustainable way in the world? My dad is a plant scientist. He's an agronomist. He specializes in nitrogen fixing plants. So all my life I've heard my dad talk about sustainability. He's part of the Department of Conservation Board in New Zealand. I've always heard him talk about sustainability. And when I was younger, I didn't really get what he was saying. So like, what do you mean, Dad? There's lots of trees and we've got everything we need forever. But as I've got older, I've realized, well, that's not so true because in my lifetime, I've seen things being reduced to a point where it's a problem. And dairy farming in New Zealand can be a problem because of runoff and the amount of water that's used in the dairy industry there, which is huge in New Zealand. I believe we're the biggest exporter of dairy products in the world. We ship so much dried milk product to China and all over. And so it's a huge part of the culture.
Right.
There are people in my family who have dairy farms. I mean, it's an intrinsic part of our world. And so I think what I've learned from talking to you, and you sort of opened up my eyes to something that I hadn't really considered, was just, hey, maybe there's a different way to approach this, and maybe it's for the betterment of all. And it's not just for selfish reasons. It's not just about the individual, but it's also more about taking a responsible approach, I guess, to being a citizen on the earth.
Yeah.
So what was it that in your talking to Dotsie that really got you? What were the things that she was saying that resonated with you that made you think you could make the change?
Well, the first thing that really stood out to me was when she said, cow's milk is for cows, right? And I never really thought about that before because we all grew up with watching babies getting fed powdered milk that turned into cow's milk and that you would give to your babies. And for a long time, you remember, particularly in Africa, there was a huge problem where mothers were being discouraged from breastfeeding, and they were being encouraged to wean their babies off breast milk to go to cow's milk. So
that was Nestle that was sending powdered milk over to Africa and selling it there. And of course, the problem was that they had to mix. They had breast milk, but it dried up because then they would buy this product that was supposedly better. Yes. But it not only was not better because it was cow's milk, but that it cost them too much, so they would dilute it with water that was often dirty, so it made them sick. So Nestle it was a huge publicity problem for Nestle for a long time. I was a kid, but I remember hearing about it. So anyway, sorry, proceed. I just wanted to give background to our listeners.
Yeah, no, and so when Dotsie was talking about that, I remembered that story because I remember my mother, who was a big proponent of breastfeeding and with our own daughter, just saying how important it was, is it giving your child a great start. I had just remembered that story. So then I suddenly connected what Dotsie was saying. I was like, yeah, you're right. It's like, why are we having something that's engineered to grow an animal at an exorbitant rate? Why are we putting that into a human body? And so I just had never, it just made a whole bunch of connections for me. So that was the first thing. And then I also just became sort of intrigued with this idea of taking responsibility for looking at alternatives and more sustainable alternatives, because I worry. I travel a lot. I've been to 130 countries, and I see where so many people in developing countries are wanting what we have in the West, and yet a lot of the things that they have been doing for centuries are better choices than the things that they're aspiring to. So I like the idea that we start to think about getting back to basics. And, if a mother can provide milk for a child, well, maybe that's what's meant to happen.
Maybe so. I really applaud you for trying, for taking the challenge, for staying committed, for doing it. And I want to go back to the taste aspect, because it's so true. And a lot of people are really fearful that they're going to, never have a great latte again, or never be able to spread delicious cheese on their cracker again, or never be able to have macaroni and cheese, on and on and on. And there certainly is addictive nature with the fat and the salt and even the quesomorphine, but your taste buds do go through a transition. Yeah. It's called neurotaste adaptation, and there is a period of time, and it can be anywhere from 3 days to the full 21. And I found I had the exact same worry as you did. That very last thing that I changed over was the creamer in my milk, because I just kept thinking, coffee is never going to be the same again. I mean, it was so selfish, but it was just like, I was really concerned with that. But it was really cool how it was only about 10 days that it was like, oh, this is not so good, to this is pretty good, to this is delicious. Yeah. And even more delicious than the former.
The other day I accidentally, a friend of mine got a latte for me, and he knows that I'm having almond milk now in my lattes. And I guess the order came back wrong. So I took a sip, and it was the old latte that I used to have. He made a mistake. I was the taste was so bad. Yeah. It was milk. I hadn't touched any milk since I had started. And I was sort of like, ooh, it tasted kind of like greasy and fat.
And sour a little bit. I've had the mistake happen, and it's like sour or something.
Yeah, it was immediately. I did one of those. Oof. Like, to be honest with you, it was a little bit like what happened when I first tried the alternatives. I did the same kind of I went, whoa, what is that? That's not going to work. And that's what happened with the milk. And so then I realized exactly what you just said, that my taste buds had changed. And, I reached out to you guys to ask you about some cheeses. So I tried those brands of cheese that you guys suggested. And there was one there that you hadn't mentioned, and I tried it was called cheddar, a non-dairy cheddar. And I had it on crackers with I love cheese crackers and chutney. And I had it with the way I would normally have cheese. And I have a feeling that had I tried that before, in the beginning, way back before I quit all the lattes and everything, it would not have tasted the way it did. But this tasted really good. That's right. There was another one. It was a Jack Pepper cheese. I'm telling you, I have not tried macaroni and cheese, because I know, Dotsie, you spoke about that. But now I'm kind of interested. I'm looking at things I haven't, like I said, I'm looking at things on the shelf going, that looks really interesting. I wonder what that's like. And then I'm looking at the ingredients more than I was before, because now I'm kind of intrigued. Like, how do they do this? It actually tastes like cheese, or what I remember cheese tasting like.
Yeah,
can you say what? I mean, because I like Miyoko's, and I think we're okay with promoting. We don't get any. We have no ulterior motive or any personal gains, but we do like people to know about the brand. So if there's a brand that you particularly like that you want to share,
I'm trying to think if
I know Miyoko's has a soft cheese, and do you know what that Jack Pepper?
Oh, it was. Hold on.
Yeah, I wonder if the Jack Pepper's the nut cheese brand. Because I
Was
like
it
those.
this one?
Tree line?
Was this one?
Oh,
yes.
field roast. Those are delish. I think I told you about that and tree line and Miyoko's. I'm pretty
was
sure
this
the
one of
three
yours?
that
Okay.
I sent you, and they have field roast. That brand has the tomato cayenne. That's just the creamy original, so that's just great on Beyond Burgers or something like that. But the tomato cayenne has a really great kick. I had it last night. It's so good just on crackers, just like you would do cheese and a bit of Cabernet, and if you so choose.
I commend you for trying and, being open to it, because a lot of times folks will just try once and they might try cheese that's not so good and they'll say, oh, vegan cheeses aren't good. But you need, just like any food, you need to kind of
a little bit of time.
Search around.
Just like cheeses itself. I mean, not every cheese you have is, good either.
That's right.
Right.
Going back to the day, I mean, you find the cheeses that you like and the brands that you like, and you would zero in on those. And that's what I'm sort of doing now. And quite frankly, it's kind of fun because I've been experimenting, and I just buy, a minimal amount, and I try it out. And what's interesting is I've tried some of these with people who are they're not vegan, and I've just said to them, hey, why don't you try this cheese? And not all of them, but a lot of them who haven't gone through the whole transition, if you like, they're like, wow, that tastes really good.
Yeah.
And they haven't picked that it's not cheese.
It's like Adventure Crazy does cheese.
Yes.
Because it's an adventure, right? Like, it's pretty fun because your taste buds just completely open up.
It's a whole new world. I was interested in that in the dairy, the non-dairy milks that you were trying. You didn't mention soy. Were you concerned about soy having estrogenics in it? Is that why you chose not to go for soy?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the considerations, just in my research. And I be honest with you, I know that it's been in some of the products that I've tried, but as for the taste, I just preferred the almond milk. I mean, almonds. I love almonds, and I guess I just sort of gravitated towards that.
I actually just brought that up to make a point about milk, is that a lot of people are afraid of soy, especially men, because they feel that it might be feminizing, but that they forget that the cheese that they eat comes from a pregnant cow, which has a lot of estrogen in it because she's pregnant. So that's something that
and progesterone.
All sorts of hormones are in the milk of a dairy cow.
Yeah, a lactating mother.
And so if you're afraid of soy, then you should definitely be afraid of milk. Cow's milk.
Right.
So if someone does mention that to you, Philip, then you can mention that, soy definitely is not, it doesn't really have nearly as many hormones as the milk does.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's just, I think one of the great things about the journey is just learning another world. I'm a curious person inherently, just always been a curious person. I love learning new and different things and trying new and different things, and I sort of no reason for me to have dairy anymore. It was not, now that I've got this far, it's not really, it just doesn't feel like a big deal. You know what I mean?
Have you traveled as a vegan, and how have you found that? Because I know you do travel a lot.
Yeah, I have. I'm finding more and more that there's more and more options. I'm amazed at how quickly, even this year, in places that I've visited, I'm amazed at how more and more places have been offering almond lattes. Like, I'm seeing them appear on almond lattes or soy lattes or hemp lattes. That I'm seeing all of that appear on as an option. When I was in New Zealand recently, I was able to have that option. A lot of the food that I love I've always been a big fan of vegetarian food. I love Indian food. Mm-hmm. There, of course, they love putting butter into a lot of their sauces, but there are lots of things that they make really delicious food that don't have dairy in them too.
You mentioned the reducitarian, and it sounds like it's a step-by-step way to improve one's diet for the planet or for your health. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I think it's just having an awareness about what you're eating, where it's come from, understanding the sustainability of, I mean, it's a little bit like the environment, right? Like people think, well, what is one person's choices? How is one person's choices going to affect the bigger problems? But it really does start with, one person telling another person, a little bit like Dotsie telling me, and then maybe I say something to somebody, and then word of mouth, and people start to think more. Not everybody is going to do it. There are going to be people that say, I'm not changing what I do. I like what I do, and that's fine. But again, that's why what I liked about the reducitarian idea was just the idea of, instead of going just straight cold turkey, starting to think, so to speak, starting to think about what you can do gradually. And then to be aware of choices you're making.
So, not to take the conversation away from not having dairy, because yay, you're a fascinating individual, and I was really inspired by the work you did, especially when I was a professional cyclist towards the end of my career, and you started a cycling team called No Opportunity Wasted that was a spin-off, if you will, of the self-help book that you authored, focused on living each moment that like it was your last. And you've continued that theme, which is obviously now in your podcast and a lot of the work that you do now. And I want to tell our listeners the 8 BUCKiT themes. And then I'd love to talk about them going back from the very beginning when you really, where this all stemmed from when you were 19. But I don't want to miss everyone hearing these 8 themes, because I think they can think about them, noodle on them, figure out how they might apply to their life. And some of them are going to resonate deeper than others. And I'm going to tell you the 2 that resonate mostly with me. So number 1 is face your fear, then get lost, test your limits, take a leap of faith, rediscover being a child, shed your inhibitions, break new ground, and aim for the heart. That's my favorite one, that last one. So I want to hear from you on these 8 BUCKiT themes and which ones resonate with you the most. But let's just go back to when this all started, and what this idea stemmed from, which is when you were 19, right? And you were on a shoot and you had a really scary experience.
Yeah. So I started in television when I was 18. Straight out of high school, before I even went to college. There was no degree to do at college, and so I just knew I wanted to tell stories and share stories, and against my parents' better judgment, I went straight and worked at a TV station. And I love photography, and I love telling stories, and I had been doing a lot of improv theater and theater at school. I just knew I knew something around the idea of entertainment. And then I get this hosting job, which is an interesting story in itself. It started at a Christmas party, and I suddenly found myself hosting a network show with 2 other people. And the show was where people would write in and get us to go and do adventures. And I found myself on a shipwreck, or in a shipwreck, 120 feet down on its starboard side. And I got separated from the diver that I was with. And I had never been inside a wreck before, and I was tremendously claustrophobic. And this thing inside was cold. There was a very strong current running through, and we were meant to meet the crew inside the ballroom of a 22,000-ton shipwreck. We're talking like something the size of the Love Boat, and the crew never made it in. And the diver that I was with, we got separated. The diver that I was with told me to wait where I was, and then suddenly disappeared while we were down in the bowels of this ship. And by the time I realized that he'd gone, and I scrambled to try to find my light, I had stirred up all the silt around me. I couldn't see anything, and I was holding the light, and then the current caught me, and I started drifting. I'd let go of the table that I was holding onto in the ballroom where we were waiting. And I shone the light around. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see him. And I just had like a massive panic attack and started breathing too fast on the regulator. And if anybody knows anything about diving, if you go too fast on the regulator, you beat the valve. There's an exhale, inhale scenario. That's why they get you to breathe evenly. And I was going so fast, I was beating the valve and the water was getting sucked in. I was choking on the water. And 120 feet down is a long way. You haven't got a huge amount of air because the deeper down you are, the faster you use up your oxygen. Oh. And I don't remember too much other than I obviously got out of there. And when I got out, I felt like this. I remember looking up into the sky and it was blue and I was like, wow, I'm alive. And I immediately thought of all the things that I hadn't done in my life and thinking what an idiot I was that I thought I was going to live forever because that's what you think when you're 19.
Oh, yeah.
I had just, that I could have just gone like that. And the first thing I thought of doing was writing down all the things that I would have regretted not doing with my life. And the only piece of paper I could find was a paper bag, a brown paper bag. I got a pen and I just started writing everything. And it was a pretty selfish list. I was 19 years old. And, you know, there were lots of things on there.
What kind of things?
Well, Dotsie, I wasn't that experienced with women, so I can tell you that...
Having somebody shave your legs, a beautiful cyclist, how's that?
A super hot blonde chick to shave my legs. Tick.
Tick.
No. So there were all kinds of things. I wanted to climb Mount Everest. I wanted to travel to every country on earth. I wanted to break a world record.
Wow.
There were all kinds of things. And
some of which you've done, but some of which you've done.
Yeah, some of which
you decided not to do, like climbing Mount Everest because you now have a child and you felt that was, yeah.
I thought that would be an irresponsible thing. And later in life, I was given the opportunity through a television show to climb Mount Everest. And my daughter was 8 at the time. And I thought, this is a completely, utterly ridiculous thing to consider when I have the responsibility of a young girl to bring up. How can I justify that risk? You know, it's not a risk I should be taking because if I'm gone, who's going to be there? I mean, obviously she has a strong mother and everything, but I'm saying as a father, you're making different choices. So I push that down. It's not that I don't have a desire to do it, but it's really a low priority, to be honest with you now, because I see it. I see a lot of the things that are on my original list as much more selfish in the beginning. And now a lot of my things, which speaks a lot to the idea of aim for the heart, where you kind of, one of my themes, which is where you do something for somebody else, which is one of the things that ended up going on my list and later in life was to raise $1 million for a charity, which I'm pleased to say we did after riding across America. And then giving all, 100% of the profits from the film we made, the documentary, all to MS. So yeah, that was the impetus for the list. And that list has been the impetus for a lot of the television shows that I have done over the years. And once I had started living my own list, I wanted to share that list with others. And that's what motivated me to do the book.
How has the list is obviously, like you just said, it's really changed over the years. What's one thing that's on there now that would have never been on there when you were 19?
Well, the raise $1 million for a favorite charity would, I just wasn't even thinking that way. My head was, it was much more about what's on the list for me.
What's in it for me?
I want to travel the world and go to all these countries, and I want to break a world record. And it was a very much an I list. And now as I've got older, the list has become much more of a collective we list, if you like, what can we do and what can I be a part of rather than what can I, it reminds me of Kennedy's speech, right? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I think it was that whole shift for me. It was like, okay, well, now I have some people know me from television, and how can I use that, limited celebrity to do something good in the world. I actually affect some change. And that was, big choice. And I pulled together a team, and we raised the money to do it. And it was one of the best things I've been a part of, having my dad there and meeting people across America and small town America. I got way back. I got a lot more back than I ever thought I would be getting back.
It's funny how that works.
Do you have a personal connection to multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, I didn't realize that I did until later. So what happened was my wife and we got involved in cycling locally, and there was a local club here that was involved with funding young riders, juniors coming up, who, as part of the program, had to take part in the Bike MS ride here in Southern California every year. So we were asked to come on as a title sponsor, and one of the choices that my wife Louise and I had made was that we would give a certain percentage of what we made to some charity. Like, we just carved out, it was always a percentage thing, it wasn't an amount. It was like, okay, let's carve off a percentage and let's see what we can do with that. So we did things like, one of my daughter's friends, we helped pay for his school fees, and we just like a give back kind of a pot of money. And so we took some of that money and we funded this amateur cycling team. And the cycling team grew, and then it grew into a sort of an amateur local women's team as well, because this local team was for young men. And my wife got into cycling, and she did quite well. And she thought, well, why are we helping just the young guys? Let's also help the young women. So then we started helping young women as well. And then out of that, we had an opportunity to sort of expand it into something even bigger, which was funding a professional women's team. So then we went out and we raised money for that, and we grew that. Now, all along, I then started taking part in these Bike MS rides, and then they sort of leaned on me to become a bit of a spokesperson for MS. And then I realized that I had MS in my family. And then I started meeting people with MS, and then I started to understand a little bit about the disease. And so I think I've ridden in maybe 20 of the different Bike MS rides all across the country. I've ridden on tandem bicycles with people who have MS. And so the idea with the professional women's team was that we were going to use their success as a way to generate media to then get people to call out the now MS, now Novartis is what the professional team was called. Novartis was a drug for MS. So I think I've answered your question, but it was something that we just walked into. We didn't know where it was going in the beginning. But then after 3 years of running a professional women's team and trying to hold down the jobs that I'm holding down, Dotsie will tell you, a professional women's cycling team, funding them, getting awareness, it's not an equal playing field for men and women. It should be, but it isn't. It's a tough business. It was very stressful, and we're very proud of what we did in 3 years, but it was going to give me a heart attack, I think, if I kept going.
Yeah, you should be proud,
and,
but it is a tall order.
I want to note that, you mentioned in the beginning that when you were 19 and on that list, it was a selfish list, but that in 2017, you were named one of the 200 most influential philanthropists and social entrepreneurs. So I just want to honor you, because not only do you challenge yourself physically, because you have broken world records like the bungee jumping world record, but you also are challenging yourself on a spiritual, emotional level. So thank you. It's helping a lot of people.
Yeah, well, as well as I do, there are so many celebrities out there that for whatever reason just don't do even a little something. And it always blows my mind, because they have this power in their pocket that they don't play. I mean, I'm not a huge celebrity, and you think of a big celebrity, and you think of some of the things that working with others and teaming up with others, some of the things that we've been able to achieve. And I think, God, I look at some of these people who are real like A-profile celebrities, and I think, man, if you could just give up just a little bit to lend your name behind just one little thing, what you could achieve, that takes me 10 times as much because I don't have necessarily the same social media footprint or whatever. And it just blows my mind that they don't. Those who do, I just have such admiration for them, but it doesn't. You think of Paul Newman, for me, he's the first person that springs to mind. He gave all the money from Newman's products away. And there are a lot of celebrities who do a lot of good things, but I wish more would. I really do. I wish more would. I've been to events where a certain celebrity's meant to turn up to a triathlon or something like that, and at the last minute you get a call and the publicist says, oh yeah, so and so's, they were out late last night and they're not going to make it. And it's like, come on.
Yeah, unbelievable.
They don't realize how good actually, not only are they helping others, but they're actually helping themselves. It feels so good, and there's a sense of deep purpose.
You miss out on that. Of your 8 BUCKiT themes, Aim for the Heart and Rediscover Being a Child are the ones that resonate most with me. Which ones do you find that people struggle with the most?
Well,
because they're not easy. I just want to say that.
So between Aim for the Heart, you said, and which one?
Well, for me, Rediscover Being a Child and Aim for the Heart. But of all 8, which ones do you find, of all of the many conversations I'm sure you've had on your podcast and in other walks of your life, really putting these themes out there, are there a couple that people really struggle with, or really go, oh, I can't quite do that, or that's too much of a stretch for me? What do you find is like the biggest barrier in the human condition?
Well, I think definitely, people do struggle with rediscover your childhood, because rediscovering your childhood is such a broad one, because being a child opens you up to the realm of possibility and being curious. Remember that book, Curious George and the Man in the Yellow Hat? Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that as a kid, and, Curious George was so curious and wanting to do so many different things, and the man with the yellow hat was this great facilitator who made things happen. And we grow up. You remember when you're a kid, you're like, you're gonna do everything. You're gonna do every job. Anything is possible, and you have this wonderful sort of naive kind of approach to life where you just roll into anything and give it a shot, and then slowly, a lot of people, as they get older, they become like more of a dried up old sponge. It's like that beautiful, pliable sponge that we have as a brain when we were a kid suddenly dries up, and then the drier it gets, the harder it is to like get the water to like squeeze into the sponge. And so the reason that I love Rediscover Childhood is just it gets people in the mindset of thinking like a child again, like just like dreaming and just like sitting down and having, not that you want children to do this, but sit down and have a nice glass of wine and just talk over ideas with somebody that is really creative. And you guys probably know this, that old, we used to do it in improv, the yes game, where all actors are sitting around and somebody throws out an idea and you're not allowed to say no or but or anything. You have to like take that idea and run with it. Yeah. And it was one of my favorite exercises, and I still use it today with brainstorming in TV, because I really believe there are 2 types of people in the world. There's those who immediately start with, they hear an idea and they immediately start with yes. And then there are those other people that they hear an idea and they immediately go to no. Huh. So, I like to surround myself with people who have that childlike brain, who are very much in touch with what it's like to be a little immature. They say the first sign of maturity is a little immaturity. And so I love being around people that start with, let's do it. Let's go try that. And as opposed to, well, I don't know, my knee is hurting and I can't go for a walk right now. I'm just like,
right.
So
They're just embracing exploration and discovery, which is what we just tend to shut down as we're aging and we become that hard sponge, right? Because life happens and we've had all these no's in our life and whatever might be things that have gone wrong or, had us circling the drain at some point. And then we just get harder and harder and we don't have that thrill of discovery because I think we're afraid. We're afraid, I discovered that and it's going to go like the last thing went that I messed up. And that's then that's that, critical mind coming in and, there's a
analysis paralysis.
Yeah, it is. It's right. It does become that.
Right. And so this is what I say to my daughter. I say, you have a young, beautiful brain and you can decide how you react to all the stimulus in the world. Mm-hmm. You have the power to decide how you react to things. If you at a young age start practicing being an optimist, by the time you're my age, you will be a very good optimist. And conversely, if you practice being a pessimist, you will be very good. And I've told her, I have met the most amazing optimists and I have met the worst pessimists. I have met people who come up with excuses that are so good that I will acknowledge it to them and I'll say, you know what? That is hands down the best excuse I have ever heard for not doing something. And I will laugh with them about it. And I don't know if you know this, but you are unbelievably good at coming up with excuses. That is like an unbelievably good excuse. So I believe in this whole idea of just like, the idea of changing a habit. It takes time. It's just like the idea of becoming very good at something, whether it's cycling or whether it's cooking or whatever it is. You put the time in, you will reap the rewards. So I say to people, you start with an attitude and you start practicing that and you will get very good at that attitude. In my business, I want to be working with people where if we encounter a problem, which we're always going to encounter when you work in production, I want people to start with, I want to be around people who are the problem solvers. So they don't label the problem. They just go, okay, this is what I suggest we do to fix this. As opposed to the pessimist who will go, oh my God, we've got a flat tire. Yes, we know that. Oh my God, the spare tire is underneath all the equipment. We're going to have to take all the equipment out of the car. We're going to have to put it. Why are you telling me exactly what I know we have to do here? That doesn't help. Just let's talk about how we fix this.
Action.
Yeah, it's interesting because you express an interest in habits and forming them. So we want to have a good base of good habits, but then we have to be flexible enough to change the habits into which we get entrenched. So there's like a balance, I think. And as we get older, we get more and more comfortable with all our habits, both bad and good. And so you being willing to change your habit of what you, especially in the morning, which people really hold on to what they drink
the
or
routines
eat in the morning.
Right.
It sets the tone for the day, so it can be very destabilizing in the beginning. A lot of people tackle their coffee last, and so yay you for tackling it early. Just shows how brave you are. May I ask?
Well, failed many times, by the way. And to me, that's a big thing that speaks back to the theme of rediscovering your childhood. Do you remember being a kid and you just kept making a lot of mistakes at everything and you weren't scared of making a mistake? In fact, you didn't really think of it as a mistake. You just tried something and then you'd stumble and then you'd sort of figure it out. And why are kids so amazing at jumping on a piece of a new, on a computer or figuring out because they just fail, figure, that works, and they find a pathway through failure. And so as people get older, I get frustrated with the idea that, again, the analysis paralysis, where they start analyzing about why something may not work, and so they get stuck in a rut and they won't even give it a try. But failure to me, I don't know why people see it as a negative. Failure to me is just a necessary step. I don't even like to call it failure. It's just stumbling maybe, but it's a necessary step that you have to take. You don't just step up to play basketball and take, and from the first shot at goal, start, swooshing the net. I mean,
no doubt.
It bounces off, it goes up the thing. You got to get that. You got to find the groove. You got to get it. You got to go after it.
No, I with my health coaching clients, I frame it as learning. It's all learning. If you find a cheese and you don't like that cheese, that's learning. You don't like that cheese, so move on to find something better. Very important
So
learning
true.
aspect. So
You had a specific question.
I did, and it's actually because I like our listeners to come away with, they have a lot of questions, especially about traveling and staying healthy. And I know this is, not as deep as some of the things that we've talked about, but you are obviously very fit. And how do you eat well and exercise regularly, traveling as you do while you're working and maintaining a crazy schedule while you do it?
Well, you know from working in production that there are times where you just really cannot afford to get sick, right? I mean, you can't, sometimes you cannot be swapped out, right? I mean, you've got a day of shooting. There's a lot of people that you're responsible to being and turning up to work and being there and being prepared and ready to go. And so I take real care with what I am putting in my body and what I'm drinking, and knowing the source of everything that I'm having because of that. So the first thing I do is Amazing Race, for instance, we shoot 12 shows in 21 days. I get myself as fit as I possibly can before I go, like in the best shape, but I don't strip too much. I mean, when I say strip, you need to leave a little bit of fat on you, because you're going to lose a lot of weight, 6 to 7 pounds in the 3 weeks that you're away, just from being up on your feet all the time. And also it makes you more vulnerable if you lose too much body fat. So you need to leave a little bit of reserve there. I'm not talking about like carrying huge amounts of weight. I'm just saying you got to make sure that you've got a little something for your body to lean back on. And then eating healthy, of course, before you go. But then when you go, being very careful about making sure you get that balanced meal, getting those, getting the protein you need and the carbohydrates you need for energy. I take vitamin B. I keep up with that. I have a shot that I make a BUCKiT nutritional shot that has B12 and Manuka honey in it. So I take those shots, and it just keeps my energy levels up. Give it a nice slow burn throughout the day. The other big thing is the hydration, because people forget to drink. They're getting on planes and they forget that when you're in a plane, it's pressurized. Most planes are pressurized to around 5,000 feet. So you're pressurized at a mile in the sky. So you're getting very dehydrated. So you got to keep your liquids up, and salts, replacement salts, because particularly if you're going to hot climates, you're losing a lot of salt. And then just being active, like getting up out of your seat on the plane and just doing a lap around the plane just to get the blood flowing, because you're sitting there for a long, long time, and you don't want to get your body run down and get susceptible to picking up stuff, because believe me, it's all around you. You know it. People are coughing and sneezing, and
it's a germ tube. It's so gross.
It
is really. Yeah, I don't like to think about it.
I bring wipes with me.
Yeah,
and they say that the
wash it down.
The counter, the
tray table
is the dirtiest thing. So I never.
Or the seat back pocket. I've heard those are pretty gnarly in there too. Not that you're going to stick your face in there or anything, but.
Well, thank you for those tips. That's very helpful. And do you work out regularly when you're actually shooting, or are you just on your feet all day?
I very rarely get to work out, but and a lot of the hotels or a lot of places we're staying at don't have gyms. So stairs have become my my go-to.
Nice hack, smart.
And I used to take a skipping rope, which is also a great way. Like 15 minutes of skipping is easily equivalent to a 30-minute run. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to skip. But stairs are great. Like, so I'll go to a hotel and a lot of time I'll only have like 30 minutes spare for a workout. So I'll go to the lobby and run down to the lobby, and then I run up the first flight and down into the second flight and down, third flight and down, and I just keep going up depending on the height of the hotel. But stairs, that's also a great way to do, as you will know, Dotsie, interval training, and just driving the heart rate up. And down and up and down and up and down, so you can maintain your fitness, and exercise just makes you feel so much better. I don't feel whole without exercising. I've been up since 5 this morning promoting Amazing Race, which goes back on the air, and I haven't had a lot of sleep in the last few days, and I haven't worked out today, and I don't feel like as good as I normally would if I have worked out. I need, it's like my coffee. I need that. It settles me. It calms me down. It helps me think straight. It's talk about a habit. It's a part of my life, it's a key part of my life.
Such a good suggestion, because I just don't even like the little tiny hotel gyms. They make me feel depressed, and I just never really get a good workout. I'm totally going to rock that stair thing. I mean, every hotel you go to, whether they have 3 flights or 50 flights, you can go up and down them.
And you're left alone, Dotsie, and it's like you've got your own Stairmaster to yourself.
Yeah.
And just be super careful when you're going down. Like, take it easy going down, because you don't want to slip in there. But
Thank you.
The thing that's really great now, that we didn't used to have is, we had music and stuff, but now you're listening to a podcast. All of a sudden, you've been running for 40 minutes up and down in the stairwell, and it's a really good workout. It's some really good alone time, and nobody disturbs you because everybody is in the elevator. Nobody's taking the stairs. You have the whole gym to yourself.
That's right. He put air quotes around that gym.
Hold your banisters going down, people. Don't slip.
Yes. We don't want any broken ankles.
Speaking of podcasts, I highly recommend your podcast, BUCKiT, for anyone who wants to work out in any way, whether it's up and down stairs or running on the beach or anything.
Or you're working out your mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have incredibly interesting guests. And as I said, Dotsie's interview was excellent. And
yeah, it's worth, your listeners should check it out just to hear, what happens when I ask the questions.
I know. It's good. So what's left on your bucket list before you leave us?
Well, space is still up there. I really am determined in my lifetime to get to outer space.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a couple of films that I really want to make. I've been doing a lot of writing recently. And then I have a bunch of documentary ideas. And I have a pilot that I've got, a pilot that I just sold that I'm going to be working on the next couple of months as well. And then, of course, I've got Race and the podcast. So I'm busy.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much for making the time for us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I wish you guys all the best with the podcast. And it's great that you guys are doing this together. And I champion what you're doing. And I hope more and more people embrace the idea. And Dotsie, you're a good salesperson. You sold me. So.
Oh, my dad will be proud.
We're going to check in another few months and see how you're doing and see where you're reducitarian, where your steps, where you're moving to after a few more months.
You want to say hello to my dog? Hold on.
Okay, he's getting his dog, folks. I think.
There we go.
Hello.
Oh, he looks like he just had some food. He's like, yummy.
He's happy that his daddy is thinking of the animals. So.
He just came in from, speaking of exercising, he just came in from a run. So he's feeling good.
Oh, good. We'll let you go so you can get out there and get your body moving somehow. Stairs, run, beach, whatever it is.
I'm going to set up for another podcast. Would you believe that? So.
Oh, I believe it.
I believe it. All right.
Thank you so much, Phil.
You're
really
fantastic. So appreciative. Bye.
Okay.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.